Fellow Americans, prepare for the insanity hitting this country on September 1st because a whole set of clocks start running that day and almost nobody is watching them. Take one new federal student loan this fall, and every other loan you already have, including loans from years ago, gets yanked onto a new repayment track with a 30-year forgiveness timeline. One loan, your whole portfolio. Meanwhile, the historical peak of hurricane season runs from mid-September through October, and NOAA is forecasting a below-normal season, which is exactly the forecast that gets people killed, because as the NOAA administrator himself said, it only takes one. And Category 5 storms have made landfall during below-average seasons. And FEMA is heading into that peak after a year of job cuts, funding uncertainty, and thousands of departures among the workers who directly help disaster survivors. So the storms come in September. The agency that responds is thinner than it has been in decades. The paperwork trap springs on families sending kids to school, and the household bills all reset at once. September 1st is the starting gun. Let me walk you through every bit of it, and exactly what to do before it fires. Take one new student loan this fall, and your entire balance gets pulled onto a 30-year track. Let me start with the one that is going to blindside more American families this fall than anything else on this list, and I mean that literally, because the trap is buried in a rule that almost nobody has read, and it springs the moment a fall semester loan gets disbursed. Major changes to the federal student loan system took effect on July 1st, 2026, under the law that passed in July of 2025. And here is the provision that matters most, straight out of the Education Department's own guidance. If you have at least one loan first disbursed on or after July 1st, 2026, you are required to repay all of your eligible direct loans, including loans first disbursed before July 1st, 2026, under either the Repayment Assistance Plan or the Tiered Standard Plan. Read that again, slowly, because it is the whole ballgame. One new loan. Your entire federal direct loan balance moves. Loans you took out in 2012 move. Loans you have been paying on for a decade. Under a plan you carefully chose, move. The National Consumer Law Center put it just as plainly. A borrower's entire federal student loan balance becomes ineligible for the older legacy repayment plans if they take out any new student loans, even if they previously qualified for those older plans. And when does that new loan get disbursed for most families? Late August and early September. Fall semester. So a parent or a grandparent who signs for one more year of tuition this fall may be flipping the repayment terms on every federal loan in the household without anyone at the financial aid office saying a word about it, because it is not the financial aid office's job to tell you, and the disbursement happens automatically. Now, let me tell you what the two new tracks actually are, because you need to understand what you are being moved into. The first is the Repayment Assistance Plan, called RAP-P. It is income-driven. Payments are set between 1 and 10% of your adjusted gross income, with a floor of $10 a month if your income is under $10,000 a year. And forgiveness comes after 30 years. 30. Under the older income-driven plans, forgiveness generally arrived at 20 or 25 years, so the finish line moved out by 5 to 10 years. And there is a detail in RAP that people are going to get burned on repeatedly. Only on-time payments count toward that 30-year clock. Miss a payment, and that month simply does not count. Over 3 decades, that adds up in a way that will devastate people who assumed a late payment here or there was survivable. The second is the Tiered Standard Plan. Fixed monthly payments with a repayment period of 10 to 25 years depending on your total outstanding balance. And here is the part borrowers do not expect. Because the term is tied to balance size, many borrowers will end up with a longer repayment period under the Tiered Standard Plan than they would have had under the old Standard Plan. Longer term means more total interest paid over the life of the loan, even when the monthly payment looks friendlier. And if you take out a loan after July 1st, 2026 and do not affirmatively request RAP, you get placed into the Tiered Standard Plan automatically. The default is chosen for you. There is more. And some of it is genuinely alarming for older Americans specifically. Parent Plus loans are now largely ineligible for income-driven repayment, and for public service loan forgiveness, unless they were consolidated by June 30th, that window has closed. Grad Plus loans are being phased out entirely for new borrowers. The SAVE plan is sunsetting in July 2028, and borrowers have already started getting removed from it. Payee and ICR are also phasing out, with enrolled borrowers required to move to another plan by July 1st, 2028. I want to give you the genuinely good news too, because there is some, and people should know it. Public service loan forgiveness remains in place, and eligible borrowers can keep working toward it. There is a new temporary 1% interest rate reduction available to borrowers who enroll in automatic debit, which is free money for doing something you should probably do anyway. And ROP's income-based structure with that $10 floor may actually be more generous than the alternatives for borrowers with genuinely low incomes. But here is what to do, and this is urgent because the fall disbursement is weeks away. If anyone in your household has existing federal student loans and is considering borrowing again this fall, stop and do the arithmetic first. Find out exactly what plan the existing loans are on, what the forgiveness timeline is, and what happens if that timeline resets to 30 years. In some cases, the right answer is to find the money elsewhere, even at a slightly worse rate, rather than trigger the conversion of an entire balance. If you are already in repayment and not borrowing again, you can generally stay on your current plan as long as you do not take out a new loan on or after July 1st, 2026. That is the single most important sentence for existing borrowers. Do not borrow, and your terms hold unless your specific plan is one of the ones sunsetting in 2028. If you are on Save Pay A or ICR, start planning your transition now rather than waiting for 2028, because when millions of borrowers all have to move at once through a Department of Education that has been dramatically downsized, the processing is not going to be smooth. Log into studentaid.gov this week and download everything: your loan list, your disbursement dates, your current plan, your payment count toward forgiveness. Save it as a PDF and print a copy. In every major servicing transition in the last decade, borrowers have lost credit for payments and had balances misapplied, and the ones who got it fixed were the ones who had their own records, and enroll in auto debit for that 1% reduction. It takes 5 minutes. One more thing on this, and it is the piece I think matters most for the people watching this channel, because a lot of you are not the borrower. You are the parent or the grandparent trying to help. Be extremely careful about Parent Plus loans this fall. They are now largely ineligible for income-driven repayment and for public service loan forgiveness unless they were consolidated before the June 30th deadline, which has passed. That means a Parent Plus loan taken out this fall is for most families a fixed obligation with no income-based safety valve and no forgiveness pathway. If you are 65 years old and you sign for $40,000 of Parent Plus debt in September, you are signing for a payment you will very likely still be making in your late 70s, out of Social Security with no mechanism to reduce it if your health changes or your income drops. I am not telling you not to help your kids or your grandkids. I am telling you to understand exactly what you are signing, because the terms available in September of 2026 are meaningfully worse than the terms that were available a year ago, and almost nobody in that financial aid office is going to walk you through the difference. Read the promissory note. Ask specifically what repayment plans this loan will be eligible for, and if the answer is that there is no income-driven option, sit with that for a day before you sign. A below-normal hurricane forecast is the most dangerous forecast there is, and the peak is mid-September. Now let me talk about weather, and specifically about why the forecast this year is going to get people hurt. NOAA released its 2026 Atlantic Hurricane Outlook on May 21st. It predicted a 55% chance of a below-normal season, a 35% chance of near-normal, and only a 10% chance of an above-normal season. The numbers: 8 to 14 named storms, 3 to 6 hurricanes, 1 to 3 major hurricanes of Category 3 or higher. For comparison, the 1991 to 2020 averages run about 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Colorado State University went further. On July 8th, they lowered their forecast again, down to 9 named storms, 4 hurricanes, and 1 major hurricane. Back in April, they had called for 13 named storms. They now describe the expected season as well below normal. The driver is a strengthening El Niño, which increases wind shear across the Atlantic and tears developing storms apart. On top of that, the Cape Verde region of the central Atlantic, where roughly 3/4 of all major hurricanes originate, has been running below average sea surface temperatures. So the science is sound, and the forecasters are doing their jobs. And as of a few weeks ago, the Atlantic had produced exactly 1 named storm all season, Tropical Storm Arthur, which brushed the Texas coast in mid-June. Now here is why I am worried rather than relieved. The historical peak of the Atlantic season extends from mid-September through October. We have not reached it. Everything I just described covers a season that is barely half over, and the half that has not happened is the dangerous half. And NOAA's own administrator, Neil Jacobs, said the thing out loud that I want you to write down. Even though we're expecting a below-average season in the Atlantic, it's very important to understand that it only takes one. We have had Category 5 storms make landfall in the past, during below-average seasons. That is the entire point. A seasonal forecast is a count of storms across an entire ocean basin. It is not a prediction about where anything makes landfall, and it says absolutely nothing about your house. A season with 9 named storms, in which one of them is a major hurricane that comes ashore over your county, is, for you, the worst hurricane season of your life. The basin-wide number is meaningless at your address, and there are 2 more wrinkles this year that cut against complacency. NPR's reporting noted that abnormally warm water in the Atlantic makes it more likely that at least one very large, destructive hurricane will form even in a quieter season. Fewer storms in warmer water can mean the ones that do form have more fuel. The second wrinkle comes from the insurance and catastrophe modeling world, and it is the kind of thing that never makes the evening news. Research has documented a poleward shift in the latitude at which tropical cyclones reach peak intensity globally, which raises exposure in regions that historically were not in the storm belt. Last season, subtropical storm Karen formed at the farthest north genesis point on record in the National Hurricane Center's database. Analysts at Allianz noted that for catastrophe models built on historical averages, these shifts represent an underestimation of tail risk, meaning the rare high-impact events. In plain language, the models that insurers and emergency planners use are calibrated on a past that is no longer a reliable guide, and the direction of the error is toward underestimating the bad outcomes. So here is the practical takeaway, and I want to be very clear that I am not telling you to panic. I am telling you not to relax. Do your preparations on the same schedule you would in an active season, and do them before September, because the peak is mid-September through October and the shelves empty 48 hours before landfall, not 2 weeks before. Know your evacuation zone by letter or number, not by a vague sense that you are probably fine. Your county emergency management website has a lookup tool. Know it, write it down, and know the route out that is not the interstate, because the interstate will be a parking lot. Know your flood risk separately from your wind risk, because they are separate perils with separate coverage. And know this, standard homeowners insurance does not cover flood. Flood coverage is a separate policy, most commonly through the National Flood Insurance Program, and there is typically a 30-day waiting period before a new policy takes effect. Which means if you buy flood coverage when a storm appears on the radar, it does not cover that storm. If you have been thinking about it, the decision window is now in August, not in September when there is a cone on the map. Photograph your home now. Every room, every wall, open every closet and cabinet, and get the serial numbers on major appliances and electronics. Do it on your phone, then back it up somewhere off-site, meaning cloud storage or a copy sent to a relative in another state. This takes 20 minutes, and it is the single highest value thing you can do for your future insurance claim. Fill prescriptions early. Get cash in small bills. Fill your gas tank when a storm enters the Gulf, not when the cone points at you. Charge every battery bank you own, and have a plan for pets, because shelter policies vary enormously, and people have died refusing to evacuate without their animals. FEMA is heading into peak season, thinner than it has been in decades. Here is the part of the hurricane story that changes the math for every household in a coastal state, and it deserves its own conversation, because it affects how long you will be on your own. NPR reported that FEMA is limping into this hurricane season following a year of job cuts, funding uncertainty, and what they described as outright existential threats. The agency spent a stretch without a permanent leader, and thousands of workers were cut, including workers who directly help disaster survivors. The reporting did note that the job cuts stopped in May according to an internal FEMA memo obtained by NPR, which is genuinely good news, and I want to give it to you straight. But stopping the cuts is not the same as reversing them. An agency that lost thousands of experienced disaster caseworkers does not get that institutional knowledge back by pausing the layoffs. Disaster response is not generic administrative work. The people who process individual assistance applications, who staff disaster recovery centers, who do damage inspections, who navigate the interaction between FEMA aid and private insurance, build that expertise over years of deployments. When they leave, the capability leaves with them. Now, I want to be careful and fair here, because I think fairness makes this more useful, not less. FEMA has never been the first responder. It never was. In every disaster, the first response is local. Your fire department, your county sheriff, your local EMS, your neighbors with chainsaws. The state comes next. FEMA is a federal backstop that arrives after a disaster declaration, and even in the best of times, the individual assistance program is slow, capped, and far less generous than most people expect. The average individual assistance award has historically been in the low thousands of dollars, which does not rebuild a house. FEMA aid was never designed to make you whole. It was designed to keep you from being destitute while you work through insurance. So the practical significance of a thinner FEMA is not that help disappears. It is that the timeline stretches, the paperwork gets slower, the disaster recovery centers are fewer and further away, and the phone lines are longer. And that means your own preparation has to carry you further than it used to. Here is the number I want you to plan around. The old standard advice was 72 hours of self-sufficiency. Emergency managers have quietly been moving that guidance toward 2 weeks for years, and given the current staffing picture, 2 weeks is the number I would build to. 14 days of water, food, medication, and cash, with no assumption that anyone is coming on day 3. Some specifics on that. Water at 1 gallon per person per day is the federal minimum, and it is genuinely a minimum, covering drinking and basic food prep, but not hygiene, wound cleaning, or dishes. For 14 days, a family of 4 at a realistic 4 to 6 gallons a day is 56 to 84 gallons. You cannot store that easily, which is why filtration and a way to collect and treat water matters more than stacked cases of bottles. Medication is the one that puts people in the hospital. Get ahead of refills before the season peaks, ask your doctor about 90-day supplies, and know that during a declared emergency, many states activate rules allowing pharmacists to dispense emergency refills without a current prescription. Know whether yours does, and what it requires. Cash in small bills, because card readers and ATMs are down when the power is out, and because the store that stays open running on a generator cannot make change for 100. And here is the piece most people skip entirely. Register with your utilities medical baseline or critical care program, if anyone in your household depends on powered medical equipment. It costs nothing, it takes one phone call, and it changes your priority in the restoration order. Do it in August, not during the outage. Finally, and I cannot overstate this, know your neighbors before the storm. In every after-action report from every major disaster, the rescues in the first 24 to 48 hours were overwhelmingly performed by neighbors, not by any agency. The retired guy 3 houses down with the boat, the nurse across the street, the family with the generator, that network is the actual first response system in this country, and it only exists if you built it in advance. A thinner FEMA makes that neighborhood network more important, not less. What actually happens when you file a claim will shock people who have never filed one. Since we are talking about storm season, let me spend some time on the part that comes after, because this is where families lose the most money, and where almost nobody knows the rules until they are standing in the wreckage trying to learn them. Start with the deductible, because homeowners' policies in storm-prone states do not work the way people assume. Many policies carry a separate hurricane or windstorm deductible, and it is frequently expressed as a percentage of your dwelling coverage rather than a flat dollar amount. A 2% hurricane deductible on a $400,000 dwelling limit is $8,000 out of your pocket before the insurer pays a dime. 5% is $20,000. People who believe they have a $1,000 deductible because that is what applies to a kitchen fire discover the percentage deductible only after the roof is gone. Go pull your declarations page out today and find that number. Not the policy booklet. The declarations page, which is the 1 to 2 page summary at the front. Look for the wind or hurricane deductible and read whether it is a flat amount or a percentage. If it is a percentage, multiply it out and write the actual dollar figure on the page in pen. That is the number you need in savings or in a line of credit before a storm, and an enormous number of homeowners have never calculated it. Next, understand the difference between actual cash value and replacement cost, because this single distinction routinely costs families tens of thousands of dollars. Replacement cost coverage pays what it costs to replace the damaged property with new property of like kind and quality. Actual cash value pays replacement cost minus depreciation. A 15-year-old roof under an actual cash value policy may be depreciated so heavily that the payout covers a fraction of a new roof. Many insurers in high-risk regions have been shifting roofs specifically to actual cash value or to roof age schedules. Check which one you have. If you have actual cash value on a roof and you can afford to upgrade to replacement cost, that is frequently the highest value coverage change available to you. Then understand how replacement cost claims actually pay out, because this catches everyone. Most replacement cost policies pay in 2 stages. First, they issue the actual cash value amount. Then they release the remaining recoverable depreciation, only after you have completed the repairs and submitted documentation of what you actually spent. So you receive less than the full amount up front and have to finance the gap yourself until the work is done. Families who did not know this have taken the first check, assumed it was the whole settlement, done partial repairs, and left thousands of dollars of recoverable depreciation on the table permanently. Now the documentation, which is the thing that determines the size of your settlement more than any other single factor. Adjusters settle what you can prove. That is not cynicism. It is how the process works. So the inventory you build in August is worth real money in October. Walk your house with your phone. Video every room slowly, narrating. Open every closet, every drawer, every cabinet. Photograph serial numbers and model numbers on appliances. HVAC equipment, water heaters, televisions, computers, and tools. Photograph the roof from the ground on all four sides. Photograph the exterior, the fence, the outbuildings, the vehicles. Save receipts for any major purchase or improvement you can find. Then get all of it off the property, into cloud storage, and onto a drive at a relative's house in another state. After a loss, the rules change. Document the damage before you touch anything, and photograph everything you do. Then mitigate, meaning take reasonable steps to prevent further damage, because every policy requires it, and failing to do so can reduce your payout. Tarp the roof, board the windows, get standing water out, and keep every single receipt for the tarps, the plywood, the fuel, the hotel, the meals, because additional living expenses coverage reimburses the cost of living elsewhere while your home is uninhabitable, and it is claimed on receipts. Keep a claim log from the first phone call. Date, time, name of the person you spoke with, and what was said. Get things in writing when you can. If your claim is denied or underpaid, you have the right to request the adjuster's report and the right to dispute it, and most policies contain an appraisal clause that provides a path to resolve valuation disputes without litigation. 2 final cautions. Be extremely careful with the contractors who appear in a disaster zone within days. Storm chasers follow catastrophes, and the pattern is a large upfront deposit followed by disappearance. Check licensing with your state, get multiple written bids, and never pay in full upfront. And be equally careful with anyone who asks you to sign an assignment of benefits, which transfers your right to collect insurance proceeds to the contractor. It is legal in many states and legitimate in some cases, but it has also been the vehicle for substantial fraud, and once you sign it, you have given away your control over your own claim. Read anything you are asked to sign, and if you cannot read it carefully in that moment, do not sign it in that moment. Your documents are the difference between recovering in weeks and recovering in years. I want to devote real time to something that sounds boring and is genuinely the single highest leverage preparation a household can make, and September 1st is exactly the right deadline to have it done by. Your documents. Think about what happens in the 72 hours after a house is destroyed or a family is evacuated. Almost immediately, you need to prove things. You need to prove who you are to check into a shelter or a hotel. You need to prove you own the property to file a claim. You need to prove your insurance is in force. You need to prove your prescriptions to a pharmacist who has never seen you. You need account numbers to reach your bank, your mortgage servicer, your utility. You need your children's records if you are enrolling them in a school in another county. If you are a veteran, you need your discharge paperwork to access VA services. Every one of those things lives on paper, in a filing cabinet, in a house that may no longer exist. So here is how to build the packet. And I want to be specific, because vague advice on this produces nothing. Get a fireproof and waterproof document bag, or small safe, and a second copy set that lives somewhere else entirely. Into it goes: birth certificates for everyone in the household, social security cards, passports, marriage certificate, divorce decree if relevant, and custody documents if relevant. Driver's licenses and a photocopy of each, the deed or title to your home, and your mortgage statement showing the loan number and servicer, vehicle titles and registration. Your insurance declarations pages for homeowners, flood, auto, health, and life, along with the policy numbers and the claims phone numbers written on a separate card. Recent statements from every bank, retirement, and investment account showing account numbers. A written list of every medication for every family member with dosage, frequency, prescribing doctor and pharmacy, plus known allergies and medical conditions. Immunization records for children. Military discharge papers, the DD 214, your will, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and the contact information for whoever holds the originals, and current photographs of every family member including pets for identification and reunification. Add a page of contacts written by hand, family, doctors, insurance agents, employer, and one out-of-state relative who can serve as the family's central message hub. Written on paper, because your phone will die and your contact list dies with it. Add cash, several $100s in small bills, 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s, not hundreds, which nobody can make change for. And add a rugged encrypted USB drive with digital copies of all of it, plus your home inventory video, plus scans of receipts. Encrypted matters, because a document bag containing every identity document your family owns is a catastrophic identity theft exposure if it is lost or stolen. Then, and this is the part people skip, store a duplicate off-site, cloud storage with a strong unique password and two-factor authentication, and ideally, a physical copy with a relative several hundred miles away. A regional disaster that destroys your house may also destroy your safe deposit box at the local branch. Distance is the whole point. Now, where does this bag live? Within arm's reach of the door you would actually use to leave. Not the attic, not the back of a closet, not the basement, which floods. By the exit. And while you are doing this, do the two adjacent tasks that matter almost as much. First, review your beneficiary designations on every life insurance policy and every retirement account. Beneficiary designations override your will. I have watched families discover that a policy still named an ex-spouse from a marriage that ended 15 years earlier, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. It takes one form per account. Second, have the conversation with your adult children or whoever would step in if you could not manage your own affairs, where the documents are, who the attorney is, which accounts exist, what your wishes are. That conversation is uncomfortable on an ordinary Sunday afternoon, and it is impossible in an emergency room, and families that never had it spend months untangling things while grieving. Set aside one Saturday between now and September 1st. Put on the coffee, get the filing cabinet out, and build the packet. It is the least exciting afternoon you will spend all year, and it is worth more than any piece of gear you could buy. If you live in the West, September is your peak season too, and the power goes out on purpose. Now I want to talk directly to everybody west of the Rockies, because so far this has been a hurricane conversation, and that is not your risk. Your September looks completely different, and it is every bit as serious. For much of the West and California in particular, the most dangerous stretch of the fire year is not the middle of summer. It is late September through October and into November. And the reason is wind. Through the summer, vegetation dries out steadily. By September, fuel moisture is at its annual low, meaning the grass, brush, and timber are as ready to burn as they will get all year. And that is exactly when the offshore wind events begin. In Southern California, they are called Santa Ana winds. In Northern California, they are called Diablo winds. The mechanism is the same. High pressure builds over the Great Basin, air flows downhill toward the coast, and as it descends, it compresses, heats up, and dries out. You get warm, extremely dry air moving at 30, 50, sometimes 70 miles an hour over landscape that has not seen rain in months. That is why the most destructive fires in California history have overwhelmingly been fall fires, not summer fires. The fuel is driest, and the wind is strongest at the same moment. And here is what most people outside the region do not understand about how houses actually burn in these events. It is usually not a wall of flame arriving at your property line. It is embers. Wind-driven embers can travel a mile or more ahead of a fire front, and they land by the thousands. They get into attic vents. They get into crawlspace vents. They collect in the gutters full of pine needles, in the dry leaves against the foundation, under the wood deck, in the wood pile stacked against the house. The structure ignites from a small ember in a vulnerable spot, not from the fire front itself, which is genuinely good news because it means the defensive work is achievable. So here is what actually matters. In order of effectiveness, the first 5 feet around your house is the highest value zone by a wide margin, and it is the one people neglect because it is where the landscaping is. Get everything combustible out of it. The bark mulch against the foundation, the dead leaves, the firewood stack, the plastic patio furniture cushions, the doormat. Replace mulch in that zone with gravel or rock. Clear anything under the deck, because under-deck accumulation is one of the most common ignition points there is. Then clean the gutters and the roof valleys, because that is where needles and leaves collect and where embers land and sit. Then look at your vents. Attic vents, foundation vents, and crawl space vents are ember entry points, and screening them with fine metal mesh is a modest, achievable project that dramatically reduces the chance an ember gets into your attic. Wire screening with openings no larger than 1/8 inch is the common standard, and check with your local fire authority for the specification where you live. Then work the zone from 5 to 30 feet. Space out shrubs. Remove ladder fuels, meaning the low branches and brush that let fire climb from the ground into tree canopies, and keep the grass cut. And many jurisdictions have legal defensible space requirements. So find out what yours are, because they exist for a reason, and in some areas compliance affects your insurance. Now let me talk about the other thing that defines a Western September, which is the deliberate outage. Utilities in fire-prone areas now conduct what are called public safety power shutoffs. When wind speeds, humidity, and fuel conditions align into dangerous territory, the utility proactively de-energizes transmission and distribution lines in the affected area, because a downed or arcing line in those conditions can start a catastrophic fire. It is a genuinely defensible practice, and it has almost certainly prevented major disasters. But understand what it means for you. Your power can go out on purpose, with limited notice for 1 to several days, in September or October, in hot, dry weather, with no storm damage and nothing broken. And re-energizing is not instant, because the utility has to physically patrol the lines for damage before restoring service, which is why these outages routinely last longer than people expect. So if you live in one of these areas, you need to prepare for outages that are scheduled rather than accidental. Sign up for your utility's shut-off alerts today, and make sure they have a current cell number and email. Learn how to find the shut-off maps your utility publishes. If anyone in your household depends on powered medical equipment, get on the utility's medical baseline registry, which in these areas frequently comes with additional notification and sometimes backup power resources. Keep your vehicles fueled, because gas stations without power cannot pump. Keep phones and battery banks charged during red flag conditions rather than waiting for the notice. Know that your well pump will not run and your electric garage door opener will not work, so find that manual release handle now. And prepare for smoke, which affects a far larger population than the fire itself. Wildfire smoke routinely degrades air quality across entire states, hundreds of miles from any flame, and it is genuinely dangerous for anyone with asthma, COPD, heart disease, or for older adults generally. Buy N95 or P100 respirators before the season, because cloth and surgical masks do essentially nothing against fine particulate. Get a portable air cleaner with a HEPA filter for at least one room, and designate that room as your clean air space. Know that you can build a very effective box fan filter for about $30, which is a well-documented approach that public health agencies have promoted. And upgrade your HVAC filter to a MERV 13 if your system can handle it. Finally, the go bag matters more in fire country than almost anywhere else, because evacuation timelines can be measured in minutes rather than days. A hurricane gives you a week of warning. A wind-driven fire can give you 15 minutes. Everything we discussed about the document packet applies double here, and it needs to live by the door with the car keys. Every household bill resets in September, and the increases arrive together. Let me close out the practical section with something less dramatic than hurricanes and more certain, which is that September is when the household budget resets, and this year the resets stack. Here is the seasonal pattern, and once you see it, you will recognize it in your own life. September is when the school year expenses land. Supplies, fees, activity costs, sports equipment, clothing for growing children, and for many families a return to full-cost childcare after a summer of patched-together arrangements. It is when fall and winter clothing gets bought. It is when the heating system needs service and the tank needs filling. It is when many insurance policies renew, because a great many auto and homeowners policies were originally written in the fall and renew annually on that anniversary. It is when property tax and school tax bills arrive in a lot of jurisdictions. And it is when the summer cooling bills from August, which are usually the highest electric bills of the year, actually show up in the mailbox. Every one of those is normal. What makes this year different is that each of them is arriving at a higher number than last year, simultaneously into a household that has less cushion than it has had in decades. So rather than list more scary numbers at you, let me give you the exercise that actually helps, because I think this is the most useful thing in this whole video for most families. Sit down this week and build a one-page September to January cash flow. Not a budget in the traditional sense. A calendar of what is due, when. Write down every fixed obligation month by month through January. Mortgage or rent. Property tax installment, if yours is due in the fall or winter. Insurance renewals with their actual renewal dates. Heating fuel delivery or the estimated increase in your gas bill. School expenses. Any annual subscriptions or memberships that auto-renew, and there are always more of those than people think. Holiday spending, entered as a real number, because pretending it will be zero is how it ends up on a credit card at 23%. Then write down income, month by month. Now look at where the gaps are. Almost every household doing this exercise honestly finds 1 or 2 months where the outflow exceeds the inflow, and they find it in November or December. The entire value of doing this in August is that you can fix a November shortfall in August with small adjustments, and you cannot fix it in November with anything except debt. Here are the levers, in the order I would pull them. Call your utility and ask for budget billing or level pay. It does not lower your total, it averages it, which turns a $400 January bill into 12 equal payments you can actually plan around. This is the single most effective and least used tool available to ordinary households. Fill your heating fuel tank on summer pricing before the season demand hits. Set your holiday number now in cash and start setting it aside weekly in August. 4 months of small contributions is dramatically easier than one January statement. Have the family conversation about a smaller holiday in August, when it is a calm discussion rather than in December when the expectations are already set and everyone is emotional. Cancel the subscriptions you found in the exercise. Most households find $50 to $150 a month of things they forgot they were paying for. Review your insurance renewals rather than letting them auto-renew, because the renewal is the moment your leverage is highest. Shop it. Ask about raising deductibles, but only to a level you could actually cover in cash, and remember the percentage deductible math we walked through. And if you have variable rate debt, prioritize paying it down before the fall, because your monthly obligation on that debt is the one line in your budget that can rise without you doing anything at all. None of this is glamorous. All of it works. And the households that come through a hard winter intact are almost never the ones with the highest income. They are the ones who looked at the calendar in August instead of the statement in January. Here is everything to have done before September 1st. Let me pull all of it into one list, because I know I have thrown a great deal at you and the value of any of this is zero unless it turns into action. Here is your September 1st checklist. Print it, tape it to the refrigerator, and work down it on student loans. If anyone in your household has federal student loans and is considering borrowing this fall, stop and calculate what happens to the entire balance before that disbursement goes through, because one new loan after July 1st, 2026 moves everything onto the new tracks with a 30-year forgiveness clock. If you are not borrowing again, understand that your current plan generally holds. Log into studentaid.gov, download and print your full loan list, your plan, and your payment count toward forgiveness. If you are on Save, Payee, or ICR, start your transition planning now rather than in 2028 when millions of people move at once, and enroll in auto debit for the 1% interest reduction. On the storm season, look up your evacuation zone by its actual designation and write it down. Identify your route out that is not the interstate. Check whether you have flood coverage, remembering it is separate from homeowners and typically carries a 30-day waiting period, which means the decision has to be made now and not when there is a cone on the map. Do the home inventory video, room by room, with serial numbers, and get it backed up off-site. Refill prescriptions and ask about 90-day supplies. Build toward 14 days of water, food, and medication, rather than 72 hours. Get cash in small bills. Register with your utility's medical baseline program if anyone depends on powered medical equipment. On insurance, pull your declarations page today and find your wind or hurricane deductible. If it is a percentage, multiply it out and write the real dollar figure on the page. Find out whether your roof is covered at replacement cost or actual cash value. Understand that replacement cost claims pay in 2 stages and that the recoverable depreciation only comes after you complete and document repairs. On fire country, if that is where you live, clear the first 5 feet around your house completely. And that means the mulch against the foundation, the leaves, the wood pile, and everything stored under the deck. Clean the gutters and roof valleys. Screen your attic, foundation, and crawl space vents with fine metal mesh. Remove ladder fuels and space out shrubs in the 5 to 30-foot zone, and check your local defensible space requirements. Sign up for your utility's public safety power shutoff alerts and confirm they have a current phone number for you. Get on the medical baseline registry if it applies. Buy N95 or P100 respirators before smoke season, not during it. Set up one clean air room with a HEPA cleaner or a box fan filter. Keep the vehicles fueled and the battery banks charged during red flag conditions. And find the manual release handle on your garage door before you need it in the dark. On documents, build the packet. Fireproof, waterproof, by the door you would actually use, originals in one place, encrypted digital copies in the cloud, and a physical duplicate with a relative far enough away that one disaster cannot destroy both. Review every beneficiary designation. Have the conversation with your family about where everything is on the household. Build the one-page September to January cash flow calendar. Find the shortfall month before it arrives. Call the utility about budget billing. Fill the fuel tank on summer pricing. Set the holiday number in cash and start now. Cancel what you found. Shop the insurance renewal instead of letting it roll. Now, folks, I want to say something about how to hold all of this, because I have given you a lot and I do not want it to land as dread. Look back over that list. Not one item on it requires you to predict the future. Not one requires a policy change in Washington, or the market to cooperate, or anyone else to do anything at all. Every single thing on that list is something you can complete yourself, with a phone call, an afternoon, and a filing cabinet. That is unusual. Most of what we talk about on this channel is genuinely outside your control. This is not. September 1st is not a date when something is done to you. It is a deadline you can beat, And the difference between the families who come through the next 6 months, steady, and the families who get flattened by them will almost never be income. I have watched this for years. It is preparation, and preparation is mostly just doing ordinary things earlier than everyone else does them. Filling the tank in August, photographing the house in August, downloading the loan records in August, building the packet in August. So pick one item off that list, the one that made you most uncomfortable while you were listening, and do that one today. Not this weekend. Today. Then do the next one tomorrow. In 2 weeks, you will have worked through the entire thing and you will sleep better than you have in months, and that is not a small thing either. And then call someone who would not have heard any of this, your parents, the widow down the street, the friend who is going through a hard stretch and has not had the bandwidth to think about September. Walk them through the list. 30 minutes of your time is worth more to them than anything you could buy them. Take care of yourselves out there, and take care of each other, because that is the part no checklist can replace.